Today we're going to talk about right thought as part of the Four Noble Truths. Before we begin, I have two important things I want to share with all of you, my fellow practitioners. First, I want to express my immense love for you. Second, our abbot here has taken on the compassionate task of restoring our temple, which represents the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma teachings. I respectfully encourage all of you, those here today and those who will listen to this later, to do your best to contribute. Every bit helps, whether it's for a single brick, a bag of cement, or a small offering. This will help the abbot with the restoration so our temple can be rebuilt quickly. Once it's fully renovated, there will be many more engaging and appealing programs for everyone to study and practice. So please, let's try our best to support this cause. If you're willing to help, please raise your hand. And let's encourage our friends to join in too. Speak boldly about it. Don't be hesitant. What is right thought? So, what exactly is right thought? First, we need to understand that right thought has two parts, right and thought. Let's define thought first, and then we'll discuss what makes it right. Thought, simply put, is thinking. And this thinking, or contemplating, involves several things. 1. Reviewing what you've learned. The first aspect is revisiting what you've learned and known. Here, we'll focus only on the Dharma, not on everyday worldly matters. Dwelling on worldly thoughts can be overwhelming, filled with endless worries. We don't have time to go into that. Our focus is on the Dharma, recalling and reviewing Buddhist teachings and principles so we don't forget them when we face real-life situations. For example, if you go for a morning walk or exercise, instead of letting your mind wander aimlessly, you can review the Dharma. Perhaps yesterday at the temple, you heard a talk about the meaning of emptiness. As you walk, you can recall and review that teaching. Or maybe the Venerable explained the law of karma. You can silently reflect on what was said. This means actively recalling the Dharma you've learned to strengthen your understanding and prevent forgetting. We often tend to forget the beautiful and profound Dharma we've learned, which stops us from applying it in our daily lives. For example, when sadness strikes, if we remember the Dharma, our sorrow might lessen. But because we forget, the sadness can become overwhelming. So, we must regularly review the Dharma even when we're not talking, when our minds are at peace, and when things are going well. We review the teachings so we don't forget them. Often, we hear that spiritual practitioners should keep their minds pure, quiet, and empty, right? We tend to believe our minds should always be tranquil. However, if you think Buddhism means constantly keeping a pure mind, you might be misunderstanding the Dharma. Why? Because achieving a completely empty mind is the final stage of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's the culmination in right concentration, where the mind becomes completely still. Before that, the earlier stages of the Eightfold Path are very active, very dynamic. Especially right thought, which requires active thinking, not maintaining an empty mind. This might seem unusual. Sometimes, people are too hasty. For example, a new Buddhist might immediately think, I must stop all thinking and maintain a pure mind. I must not think anything at all. This person has missed the fundamental practice of Buddhism. In reality, a Buddhist should learn to think and think correctly. Why? Because right thinking will eventually lead to a state of purity where thinking stops. This is a very subtle aspect of karma. I've observed some Buddhists who are very active and busy. They sit there, constantly organizing this, arranging that, moving from one task to another, all related to the Dharma, all about helping others, advising this person, assisting that person in need. You might see them busy and think, oh, they're so preoccupied, so busy. But when I observe them, I see the karmic cause for a future state of deep concentration. Their minds are constantly busy with helping others. This kind of right, beautiful, altruistic, noble thinking will lead their minds to deep tranquility one day. So, for now, just accept being busy. Don't be afraid. On the other hand, if someone doesn't go through this stage of right thought, this stage of contemplating good, noble, and altruistic morality, they will never be able to reach complete mental tranquility. If you rush into meditation now, hoping for an empty mind, it will only be tranquil for a short while before becoming agitated again. Because your merit has run out. Therefore, the Noble Eightfold Path is truly precise, meticulous, and dynamic. We cannot skip stages or deviate from this path. So, right thought is a crucial stage. For example, even the stage of reviewing what you've learned should not be overlooked. You'll notice that those who skillfully learn Buddhist teachings, or those who are deeply committed and earnest in their practice all share one characteristic. Once they've learned something, they always try to review it, remember it, and engrave it deeply in their hearts. Do you, fellow practitioners, do that? If someone, for example, casually reads a book or listens to a Dharma talk and then doesn't pay attention to it anymore, that person lacks deep commitment to the Dharma. Such a person has little spiritual root. Please examine yourselves on this. If you find that after hearing a lecture or reading a Buddhist book, you don't revisit or recall the teachings, you should know that your commitment to the Dharma is weak and your spiritual roots are shallow. If you hear me say this, don't be sad, because it's the truth. On the other hand, if someone listens to a Dharma talk or reads a Buddhist book, and then later, while washing dishes or cycling, their mind continues to recall those teachings, then that person has a rather strong commitment to the Dharma and slightly deeper spiritual roots. Please examine yourselves on this. Therefore, the first step of right thought is to always make sure you review what you've learned. In our context, this means reviewing the Dharma you've acquired. That's the first point. 2. Comparing with real life. The second aspect of right thought is comparing it with real life. This isn't about actively doing anything yet, rather, in your mind. You compare the Dharma you've learned with external reality. For example, you learned that the Venerable taught us to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, to love all beings. This is a teaching you heard yesterday, and perhaps you silently recalled it this morning. The next step of right thought is to apply it to real life. Now, as you sit here, surrounded by so many people, can you truly love each and every one of them? Test it out. Look around. These are all strangers. Some are lovely, some are a bit difficult. Some are beautiful, some are plain. Some look elegant, some seem humble and simple. Some appear gentle, others might seem agitated. Try to love them all. Can you do it? This is comparing with real life, testing it out. Later, when you're out on the street, it's the same. Traffic jams are frequent these days. You might be driving smoothly and then someone cuts you off, which is very annoying. At that moment, can you still love that person? This means you must apply what you've learned to your actual life. Or, if you've heard about the teaching of impermanence, that everything changes, then observe real life. See what lasts long and what changes quickly. Reflect on this. In essence, you must take the Dharma you've learned and apply it to your own specific, unique, and diverse reality. Not just rely on the examples given by a teacher, which are based on their own experiences. So, the second crucial element of right thought is comparing with real life. 3. Critical examination. Third, you must know how to critically examine the teachings to test their strength. It's not about blindly believing the Dharma just because the Buddha taught it. No, you must critically examine it. Are the Buddha's teachings entirely reasonable in all situations? Or, you might hear a venerable give a very good, compelling lecture. While listening, it might sound excellent, but if you simply believe it, you don't yet understand right thought. A person who understands right thought will think, this venerable's lecture sounds persuasive and logically structured, but after going home, they will recall it, compare it with real life, and then critically examine it. Are there any loopholes in this venerable's teaching? This is the true skill of someone who understands contemplation. For example, in Buddhism, you might hear the teaching that everything is empty. You go home and consider, if everything is empty, then one's mind might not be attached to life, which seems beneficial. But could there also be a downside? Could it lead to becoming indifferent or passive towards life? It's entirely possible, isn't it? If you perceive a flaw, you should find a way to ask the teacher again. For instance, if someone teaches that everything is empty, would a person who constantly views everything as empty become indifferent? Or, take this example, the Buddha taught us to love all beings around us. If you see them as no longer existing, as empty, can you still truly have compassion and love for them? So, does the teaching of emptiness contradict the teaching of loving kindness and compassion? Right? You must know how to critically examine, not just passively accept whatever the Venerable says. Listening to the Dharma should be like this. Only those who can critically examine truly understand the Dharma. Even if a teaching is said to come from the Buddha, you must still thoroughly scrutinize and critically examine it. If Buddhism is indeed the truth, it has nothing to fear from critical examination. No matter how much you examine it, the Buddha's truth will still shine brightly. Only teachings that might not be entirely in line with the Buddha's words, perhaps they are just the personal opinions of a few Dharma teachers, will reveal their flaws when you critically examine them. So, these are internal matters, thoughts within your mind. You haven't spoken them aloud, you haven't stood up to argue or debate because expressing and debating still falls under right speech. This is just within your mind, silently pondering and examining every aspect of a teaching to see if it is reasonable. Or, take this example. We say that the Buddha taught a doctrine of incredibly idealistic love, unlike any other saint or religion has ever taught, to love all sentient beings, from tiny insects to humans, celestial beings, and so on. Love them all. If a rat bites you, you still love it. If a mosquito bites you, you still love it. Now, let's start critically examining. Is that love practical? Can it be applied in daily life? Is it or isn't it? Be honest, don't be afraid to offend. It's not practical, is it? If you say you love every single sentient being, you'll immediately run into impracticality. For example, you raise fish and you love your fish, but you also love the mosquito larvae that fish eat. So what do? This is where issues arise. Or, you love your husband, but you also love the person he's fighting with. Both people are loved, but who do you side with? If you love everyone, then let them fight, right? Or, another example. You love all beings, so you love the wolf. But the wolf goes and bites the chicken's neck. You also love the chicken. So what happens then? If you love everyone, then let them eat each other, right? We see that when we apply the doctrine of loving kindness and compassion to real life, many loopholes appear. If we don't have a deeply inquisitive mindset, we'll immediately be confused and unable to resolve it, thinking, oh, the doctrine of loving kindness isn't applicable. But is that really the case? The answer is this: we love all beings. But we must also recognize that not all beings love each other. They bite, kill, oppress, and exploit one another. Our love for all beings is beautiful, but if all beings don't love each other, what can we do? Our hands are small. We cannot force everyone to stop evil and live in love. This is a very insightful point, and it's something we must discern through right thought. Therefore, understanding the Dharma means understanding it thoroughly, down to every subtle nook and cranny. Only by being able to answer these profound questions will you truly understand the Dharma. And when you do, in the future, whether you meet fellow practitioners or even become a Dharma teacher yourself, you will be able to answer any question. Why? Because you have engaged in right thought. You have critically examined these matters, and you have resolved them all within yourself. So, no matter who comes to you later with the most intricate questions about the Dharma, you'll be able to answer them because you have critically examined and resolved everything. This is right thought. Perhaps sitting here today you don't know it yet, but you might become a Dharma teacher someday. Even if you don't become a Dharma teacher, you can still be an ideal Dharma friend to others. What does an ideal Dharma friend mean? It means you maintain the outward appearance of a lay practitioner, but your fellow practitioners enjoy seeking you out to ask about the Dharma. Why? Because you can answer challenging and intricate questions with clarity. So, even if you don't become a Dharma teacher, you can still be an ideal Dharma friend, right? Yes, you can. By knowing how to engage in right thought and critical examination in this way. 4. Making vows. And one more aspect of right thought is making vows. Making a vow means deeply reflecting on the Dharma to practice it eternally. A vow is, for example, when you silently make a pledge before the Buddha. I vow to diligently practice the Buddha's teachings throughout countless lifetimes, regardless of difficulties, hardships, or even threats to my life. My spiritual heart will never abandon the Dharma. Or, in times of favorable conditions, wealth, and power, I vow to maintain a firm spiritual heart and a balanced demeanor to practice the Buddha's teachings. When you repeatedly make such vows each day, it gradually transforms your entire soul and your karma across many lifetimes. Consider vows related to karma. When you realize the law of karma is true, that it's the justice of the universe unveiled by the Buddha, and you firmly believe in it, you then make a vow. I vow to understand the law of karma more deeply each day, to diligently perform countless good deeds and avoid all evil. I vow to spread the Dharma of karma to all beings so that everyone knows how to avoid wrongdoing and accumulate merit, bringing more joy and less suffering to this world. When you make such vows daily, this very right thought purifies your soul and reorients your life, not just in this lifetime but in countless future lifetimes as well. Or, when you are moved by the Buddha's teaching of loving kindness and compassion. Speaking of loving all beings, you also vow, I vow to love all beings. whether they are noble or lowly, human or animal, in this earthly realm or in the invisible realms and so on. I will love them all. When you make such a vow, that loving kindness gradually manifests in your heart. Such a vow is also right thought. These are the 4 main points we easily remember for right thought. But in reality, there are many more aspects to thinking. 5. Creativity. For example, creativity is also a form of thinking. When you go to the temple for repentance ceremonies, you prostrate, chant, and strike the bell. You observe the junior monk who strikes the great temple bell. You then have an idea, a creative thought, and propose to the abbot, can we invent a machine to strike the bell next to the great bell? You just press a button, and it strikes itself, so the junior monk doesn't have to strike it anymore. These are creative ideas. Or, when chanting becomes tiring, you think, can we invent a chanting machine? Or even a machine for enlightenment and liberation, while you remain a human. This creativity comes from observing life, seeing people still suffering, seeing unresolved issues. You then think of this solution or that solution, a way to find solutions to make life better. Those who seek solutions to improve the world are called creative. You might wonder why modern practitioners lack the spiritual depth, the ethical standards, the shallow meditation, and the limited psychic powers and wisdom of ancient saints. You hear of ancient saints with profound wisdom and vast psychic powers, and you ponder why. You want to find a way to elevate the spiritual level of people today. You sit and contemplate, seeking answers. This too is right thought. And one day, you might unexpectedly create a path of practice that is truly precise, aligned with the Buddha's ancient teachings, yet suitable for the modern scientific era. A path that allows people to effectively practice, transform their inner selves, deepen their spirituality, and elevate their morality, becoming truly extraordinary masters. Where does such creativity come from? It's born from the concern you feel when you look at yourself and see deficiencies. When you see that Buddhism isn't shining as brightly, that people lack spiritual power and cannot achieve enlightenment and liberation as the Buddha taught. You feel anguish, you ponder, you search. This anguish, pondering, and searching is what we call creativity. And this creativity is within contemplation, within right thought. Only those who don't ignore the suffering of others tend to be the most creative. For example, you're on the road and see traffic jams, frequent accidents. You wonder how to reduce these situations. You search for solutions, and you might discover many innovations. These are worldly matters, but it's the same in the Dharma. How to practice effectively. When you search and ponder, you will be creative. And the hallmark of those whose thinking leads to wisdom is precisely creativity. And this creativity makes Buddhism always new, always fresh. Why? We must remember this. Antique items become more valuable the older they are. But fashion? The newer it is, the more appealing it is. The Dharma is also like that. The way it's presented matters. For example, the term loving kindness sounds good, but if someone says, oh, loving kindness again, every time they hear it, they might get tired of it. It's old news. So, you have to present the same concept in a new way to make it fresh and appealing. Although the Dharma itself is ancient, its content is very old. But the way it's presented must be new to attract people. The Buddha's teachings from ancient times about reincarnation, karma, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, meditation are extremely rich and profound. But if we repeat those exact words without any change, people won't be able to listen, especially those who practice seriously. Therefore, the same teachings must be presented in a very new, creative way, and this will make Buddhism richer and more appealing to Buddhists. However, we must be careful not to be too creative and stray from the Dharma. If you do, you incur very heavy karma, possibly leading to rebirth in lower realms like animals or hell. That is truly hell. That is, creativity that deviates from the Buddha's teachings and causes listeners to misunderstand or practice incorrectly, leading to no benefit, incurs extremely heavy karma for the speaker. Being reborn as an animal or in hell is a real possibility for a Dharma teacher. It's not a trivial matter. Being a Dharma teacher is very dangerous. You see how many people listen intently to you. And they might admire you, but in reality, it's the very flame of hell. It's a true trial. So, if you feel you practice well, it's good that you have the right to spread the Dharma. But you must be careful not to be too creative or it might become destructive. 6. Deductive reasoning. For example, there's a type of thinking called deductive reasoning. When you hear one teaching, you deduce 2 or 3 additional teachings from it. This is also part of right thought, similar to critical examination. For example, in the law of karma, it said, as you sow, so shall you reap. If you bring happiness to others, you will receive happiness in return. If you help someone, you will be helped in return. For instance, you see a child begging for money, and you don't fully understand the situation, vaguely sensing that they might be involved in something risky. But you just hear that giving is good, so you don't ask for details, and you give them money. That money might be used to buy a bus ticket to run away from home, causing immense suffering for their parents. Who is at fault then? Did you contribute to that suffering? So you give the child money, and they are happy and joyful, and you might receive similar joy later. But the suffering of their parents, you might also receive that in return. This is deductive reasoning. In the law of karma, when you help someone to be happy, you must be careful if that person's happiness causes suffering to others. In that case, you might receive 2 karmic results consecutively. You'll receive a joyful result and then a painful result from your act of giving and helping. This is what's called deductive reasoning. Understanding one teaching but inferring 2 or 3 more implications. This is also called right thought in learning the Dharma. 7. Inductive reasoning, or inductive reasoning, which is gathering or synthesizing. You observe many coinciding phenomena and then deduce a rule or principle. For example, our ancestors deduced 5 rules that we might not know. And I don't intend to mention them here because it might cause offense. For instance, our ancestors would say, don't go to someone's house who. This is just an example as it's sensitive. I'll just say it out loud. Or, for example, our ancestors would say this, if you see a person with one eye larger than the other, or eyes that aren't symmetrical, and you observe 10 such people, you'll find that they all eventually betray others and have unstable minds. So, they conclude, asymmetrical eyes, unstable mind. This is inductive reasoning, observing many situations and then drawing a conclusion. From this, our ancestors would say, my family doesn't visit people like that. Or, for example, our ancestors had this saying, those born in the year of the pig just sit around and eat. This suggests that many people born in the year of the pig tend to be lazy. But this was based on observing 10 people and then rushing to a conclusion, forgetting about the 11th person. That is, this person is also born in the year of the pig, but they're a hungry pig, so they suffer their whole life. So, when you observe 10 people and draw a conclusion, be careful of the 11th person. This is also contemplation and drawing conclusions. Doubt and acceptance. Or, there are 2 other aspects that also belong to contemplation. Doubt and acceptance. For example, when you hear a teaching, you must know how to doubt it. Now, it's said that if someone chants the Buddha's name diligently, they will be reborn in the Buddha's pure land. Does that sound reasonable? Does it sound plausible? It sounds very agreeable, right? But you must practice doubt, you must doubt it. I wonder if it's really true. Now, let's give 5 examples. Suppose you're a very wealthy person owning a mansion. You have many servants. Among them, there's one servant who constantly kneels before your mansion, praying and calling out to you, my lord, I want to come live with you. My lord, I love you so much. Please let me come live with you. The servant doesn't do any work, just constantly prays like that. And there's another servant who doesn't call out to you, but respects you, and just constantly works. They do all the farming, manage the estate, and perform all the duties very well. After 10 years, which person would you invite to live in your mansion? The diligent one. Not the one who just constantly begs, right? You would only favor someone who does your work, who helps you with your affairs, not someone who just begs. This is if you have wisdom. If you lack wisdom, you might prefer the one who begs. Are you a person with wisdom or without? You must have wisdom, right? So, among all the Buddhists, some constantly beg the Buddha, Buddha, let me return to you. Buddha, let me return to you, while another Buddhist diligently spreads the Buddha's teachings throughout this world. Who would the Buddha take in? You'll know how to doubt, how to raise questions, and you'll draw your own conclusions. I'm not answering this for you, I'm just posing the question, and you, fellow practitioners, can conclude whether it's right or wrong. So, if you want to be reborn with the Buddha, what must you do? You must diligently perform the Buddha's work, right? What does the Buddha want? The Buddha wants all beings to be enlightened, liberated, and to understand the Dharma. So you must focus on that. Then that person will be loved by the Buddha. That's why when we hear a Dharma teaching, we must know how to doubt. We shouldn't just accept it immediately, even if it's spoken by a highly respected person. Did the Buddha teach this doubt? Yes, the Buddha taught it in many suttas, especially in the Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha said, don't believe anything at all. That's excellent, doubt everything. And when you've examined and doubted everything to such an extent that you find no flaw, then you accept. That's the stage of acceptance. If you say you believe everything a venerable teaches, meaning you accept everything without scrutinizing or critically examining, then you don't know how to learn the Dharma. A person who knows how to learn the Dharma, for example, when listening to a venerable's lecture, must know how to doubt, how to critically examine. Only when you've doubted and critically examined and found no flaws will you believe that what the venerable said is true. Or, there are some Dharma teachings that you must practice for many years and months before you know if they are true or false. For example, I often encourage you, fellow practitioners, to prostrate to the Buddha with all your reverence. I often say that all merits begin with the merit of prostrating to the Buddha. If we sincerely revere the Buddha, we naturally have many opportunities to practice. Our spirituality will naturally open up easily. We will naturally have many good memories appear in our minds. That's what I often say. Can you believe it immediately? No, don't believe it. You must go home and practice it. Practice sincerely prostrating to the Buddha for 3, 5, or 7 years and see how your mind changes. If, after 3 years of sincere prostration, your mind becomes firmer, more resilient, more stable, more joyful, and more good thoughts appear, then accept that it's true. The Venerable's teaching is correct. Sincere prostration accumulates merit. But if you prostrate for 3 years and see no results, then the Venerable's teaching is wrong. Or, some people say that if you chant certain mantras into water and have others drink it, it can cure illnesses. Do you believe it immediately? No, don't believe it. Go home and try chanting it yourself. Then have someone drink it. For example, if someone has AIDS, you chant to the water and have them drink it. If that person recovers, then it's true that chanting to water for healing is real. But if, after chanting to the water, the person gets worse and needs emergency care, then don't just blindly accept it. You must re-examine it before accepting. So far, we've talked about what contemplation is. Now let's talk about right thought. We remember that the Buddha spoke of right thought, not a lack of thought. Remember that. What is right thought? So, what exactly is right thought? Right thought involves several points. 1. Contemplating Dharma. First, we contemplate the Dharma. These are the teachings we read in the sutras and hear from venerables. When we reflect on these teachings and remember them, that is right thought. 2. Contemplating good deeds. Second, we contemplate good deeds. Are contemplating good deeds and contemplating Dharma the same? Not exactly. They are similar but slightly different. Dharma is vast, encompassing spirituality, wisdom, enlightenment, and liberation. Dharma is a broad, general concept. Good deeds, however, are smaller in scope, focusing on our conduct with people, with animals, and with our living environment. Good deeds are smaller in scale but more specific and practical. For example, if we contemplate the Dharma, we might contemplate the compassion of bodhisattvas and arhats, their extensive Dharma talks, or countless lifetimes of rebirth. These are all Dharma. But if we contemplate good deeds, it's smaller. For example, you recall that 3 years ago, you had an argument with a neighbor, and since then you've maintained a distance, you don't like talking to them, and you even avoid them on the street because of that one argument. Now, engaging in right thought, which includes contemplating good deeds, means you must rethink your attitude. You must tell yourself, oh, I should forget that argument and begin to love that neighbor again. Is that a good deed? Yes, it is. In the past, when you argued, it left wounds in your heart, and you didn't want to see that person, even if they were relatives or neighbors. Sometimes even siblings argue and cut ties. You must forget and overcome these things. Contemplating work and duties is also a good deed and very practical. For example, if you're an employee at a company, reflecting on how to organize your work, what tasks you need to do tomorrow, is also right thought. It's still a good deed, even if you're getting paid for it, because it's about fulfilling your responsibilities. You must think about it beforehand. Plan what to do in the office tomorrow to fulfill your responsibilities. This is also right thought, a good deed. However, we must be careful here. Right thought is different from excessive thinking. If you overthink, your mind will become strained. Remember that. Even if you're thinking about the Dharma, if you constantly think about the Dharma, your mind will become strained. I've seen people who love to research and discuss Buddhism and they speak beautifully about the Dharma, but when you look at them, you see they love to think but don't like to meditate or apply that thinking. It's truly regrettable because they understand the vastness of Buddhism but lack the depth of wisdom and tranquility in their minds. They only stay on the surface, which is a great pity. Therefore, even though we are practicing right thought, which is an initial stage after right view, we must also practice right mindfulness and right concentration concurrently. As we've said, the Noble Eightfold Path must be practiced simultaneously. Even though the stages are ordered from shallower to deeper, in reality we must practice them all at once. While diligently practicing right thought and learning, we must also accumulate merit and meditate. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not meditating now. This year, I'm only practicing right thought. Only thinking." That's wrong. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not accumulating merit now. This year, I'm only practicing right thought, so I'll only think for a few years, and then I'll start accumulating merit later." No, the Noble Eightfold Path must be practiced simultaneously. So, when you are practicing right view, diligently learning, you must also practice right thought, know how to accumulate merit, and always meditate. Therefore, thinking is important, but don't be dogmatic and spend all your time just thinking. You must also meditate to keep your mind tranquil. Even thinking about the Dharma can make your mind agitated even though it's good thinking. So what should you do? The right proportion is this. Basically, you should always maintain a tranquil mind. Remember that. That is the foundation. And on that tranquil mind, when urgent issues arise, you then engage in contemplation to find solutions. If, in terms of time, you maintain a tranquil mind for 5 minutes, then you think for 1 minute. That's the basic proportion for right thought. But if you practice right thought excessively, forgetting to practice right concentration to maintain a tranquil mind, then it immediately becomes wrong thinking. That's wrong. So, remember that right thought has two aspects. First, contemplating a problem, which is good. Second, it must be combined with maintaining a tranquil mind. It's not about hearing, thinking, and just thinking all the time. Right thought means knowing how to observe your thoughts and how to maintain a calm mind. But when you encounter a problem, you know how to contemplate it. That is right thought. Don't be afraid. If someone's principle is to not bother contemplating when faced with issues, saying, "Oh, just keep your mind perfectly pure and tranquil," then that person doesn't know how to practice right thought. So, when you encounter a problem, you must know how to contemplate. And when you don't have a problem, strive to maintain a tranquil mind. That's practicing both right mindfulness and right concentration along with right thought. When right thought reaches a profound level, it transforms into wisdom. It's no longer just random thinking. But after you attain enlightenment, you'll see this. 3. Purifying the mind. The third aspect of right thought is purifying the mind of unwholesome thoughts. What does that mean? It means that earlier we talked about thinking good thoughts and about the Dharma, but bad thoughts can still creep in, right? For example, you think about the Buddha, about loving kindness, about karma, but throughout the day, selfish, angry, jealous, envious, or narrow-minded thoughts still appear. They haven't completely disappeared, right? So on one hand, you think good thoughts, but on the other hand, you must purify and eliminate wrong and bad thoughts. This is also right thought. Purifying these wrong and bad thoughts is extremely difficult. Not easy. It can take 1, 2, or 3 years to eliminate them. Otherwise, if you don't purify your mind for 10 or 20 years, these thoughts will still exist in your mind. This practice is difficult. Is there anyone here who can say they no longer have bad thoughts? No one can say that, can they? Because the practice of purifying the mind of unwholesome thoughts is a lifelong endeavor, it should not be underestimated. Similarly, the right concentration we achieve, where the mind is completely unmoving, is the final stage of the Noble Eightfold Path. But that concentration must be built upon the foundation of right thought, which means the wholesomeness within the soul. That is, concentration is concentration, but the foundation of that concentration is wholesomeness. Remember that. We build the mansion of meditation upon the foundation of a purely wholesome mind. That is the fundamental principle. You cannot go wrong. If you don't have the foundation of a wholesome mind and you rush to practice meditation hoping for an empty mind, understand that you are building a mansion on sand. that concentration will collapse at any time. That concentration will collapse, meaning some people practice meditation and their minds enter concentration, but one day that concentration breaks, and their minds become agitated again, sometimes even leading to madness, to mental instability. Why? Because this person rushed into meditation without having a purely wholesome mind. So, we must remember to cultivate wholesomeness before talking about concentration. Have you heard the saying, no good, no evil, in Zen Buddhism? Have you heard it? For example, when the sixth patriarch Huaining said to the person chasing him to take the robe and bowl, calm your mind. Don't think of good, don't think of evil, that is your original face. Have you heard that in the Platform Sutra? If you haven't, I'll remind you. When the fifth patriarch Hongren transmitted the robe and bowl to the sixth patriarch Huaining, Huaining was still young. Only in his early 20s, but he had great insight, great awakening. The fifth patriarch recognized him as his successor. At that time, among the assembly, there was a venerable elder, over 50 years old, who was extremely skilled and managed the community. Meanwhile, the sixth patriarch was a poor, thin layman who worked in the kitchen husking rice. How could anyone accept that the robe and the position of patriarch would be passed to a layman who husked rice in the kitchen, while the elder who managed the community did not receive it? No one could accept it. So, the fifth patriarch Hongren, being a person of great awakening, broke convention. He was not bound by appearances. He recognized that this layman, who husked rice in the kitchen, was the one with true great awakening. So, in the night, he secretly passed the robe and bowl and then escorted Huaining across the river, telling him to flee because the assembly would not accept such a thing. They would not accept that for so many years, people had followed the patriarch in practice. And they had a respected venerable elder, Shinshio, over 50 years old, yet the robe and the patriarchal position went to a layman in his early 20s who hadn't even shaved his head. The fifth patriarch knew the worldly reaction of the assembly, so he had Huaining flee. The next morning, when the assembly found out, they chased after him. Among them was a monk named Huiming, who used to be a general and was skilled in martial arts. When he caught up with Huaining, he didn't realize Huaining was the patriarch. Huiming was over 30, while Huaining was still a young layman in his early 20s. When Huaining displayed psychic power, Huiming couldn't even lift the robe and bowl. He then became afraid, sensing something miraculous. Huaining then told him, "Sit down calmly. Don't think of good. Don't think of evil. That is your original face." This monk, Huiming, is said to have attained awakening according to the sutra. I don't know if he meditated or not, the sutra just says that. Afterward, he regretted his actions and fled, never chasing the patriarch again. The sixth patriarch then told him to go back to the south and live in anonymity for a long time. The phrase, "don't think of good, don't think of evil," has caused many generations to misunderstand, to equate the precious things of this life with evil. Because the patriarch saying seems to mix good and evil together, this phrase has caused misunderstanding for centuries. Today, let's take the patriarch's words and explain them correctly, according to his true intent. Why didn't he mention good? Because the mind was already purely good. To speak of good would be redundant. Because good is self-evident. It's naturally inherent in the heart of a practitioner, so there's no need to mention good. And he didn't mention evil because he didn't accept evil, not even a tiny bit. Therefore, when we say no good, no evil, it doesn't mean equating good and evil. It means glorifying good to the fullest and not accepting any evil, not even the slightest bit. Understanding it this way is correct, in line with the Buddha's teachings in the Dhammapada, which says, "Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify your own mind." This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Have you heard that? So, that is the timeless, fundamental teaching of Buddhism. It cannot be twisted. Therefore, if we understand no good, no evil as not doing good, then we have misunderstood the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, which is to diligently perform good deeds, right? So, in this matter of right thought, we must understand that a purely wholesome mind is the solid foundation upon which we build the mansion of meditation. Therefore, practicing right thought is very good, it's fundamental. Purifying the mind is very good. 4. Cultivating virtue. Among these contemplations, the first is contemplating to establish virtue in the mind. Our minds are initially considered to be devoid of virtue, aren't they? We just live by instinct. We want to eat when hungry, drink when thirsty. We get angry when provoked. We like it when complimented. We hate those who steal from us, and we are jealous of those who are better than us. These are common habits, not virtues. These are just normal, ordinary reactions of sentient beings. But today, understanding the Dharma, we are not allowed to follow these ordinary instincts anymore. We cannot react in such a worldly way anymore. Instead, we must have a soul filled with virtue. And to have a soul filled with virtue, we must also use right thought. We must contemplate in such a way that our contemplation leads our soul to peace, tranquility, and freedom. Such contemplation is correct. But if our contemplation makes our mind troubled, then that contemplation is wrong. For example, if you are angry and someone asks you, "Why are you still angry at that person?" You might say, "Well, they left, so I just have to bear it, but if they keep doing that, how can I stand it?" If your contemplation keeps you troubled and angry, then that contemplation is wrong. You must affirm that. This is the yardstick. From now on, whenever in life you have a thought or an event that makes you troubled, you must understand that your thinking is wrong. You must change it. You must think in a way that your mind is not troubled. That's the correct way. For example, people are angry at you, they dislike you, they speak ill of you, but you must find a way to not be angry. That is due to your right thought. So, I won't say more about this. It depends on each person's individual case. Someone speaks ill of you. Perhaps you are a person of good reputation and appearance. And then you hear someone say, "Oh, that person is full of scabies on their back, they're not clean." At that moment, you might get angry. If you get angry, you must know that your thinking is wrong. You might think, "No, that person is wrong. I don't have scabies." But your soul still has scabies, imperfections. You've been practicing Buddhism for so many years, but your soul still has scabies. That person didn't say it all. You should thank them for reminding you that you're still striving to cleanse yourself. Don't you think so? Does anyone here have a soul completely free of scabies? Not yet. So, if someone says you have scabies on your back, in reality, you have more than just scabies on your back. Your mind still has scabies. If you don't believe me, examine yourself. Therefore, we evaluate virtue and freedom, and we use virtue and freedom to evaluate whether our contemplation is correct or not. If a thought increases your love for others, if a thought makes your mind peaceful and joyful, then that thought is correct. Remember that. So, tonight, tomorrow, next year, whenever anger or trouble arises, you know that you have thought wrongly. You must change your thinking in a way that you are no longer troubled or angry. Only then can it be accepted. We use thinking to uphold our morality. For example, we contemplate reverence for the Buddha. That is a fundamental virtue. To what extent should we revere the Buddha to be considered virtuous? For example, when we light incense at the Buddha altar or prostrate before the Buddha, we contemplate the Buddha's boundless compassion, the Buddha's absolute enlightenment, and the Buddha's immeasurable merit. We dedicate our entire lives and hearts to following the Buddha, and if necessary, we are willing to die for the Buddha. We are not afraid of death. We must think like that. And if we think like that for many days and months, our minds will establish the initial virtue of reverence for the Buddha. Just as the Buddha said, "A great ocean, yet but a drop of water. A great mountain, yet but a speck of dust." Remember that. The Buddha taught us to contemplate loving kindness for all beings. Such contemplation will be more effective and truly initiate loving kindness rather than just hearing about it without actualization. Today, we hear venerables talk a lot about loving kindness for all beings, but it won't become the virtue of loving kindness in our hearts until we ourselves contemplate, vow, and make aspirations. Then it begins to transform into loving kindness in our hearts. When you are alone, with no one around, you generate the thought, "I vow to love all beings in the Dharma realm." Then you step out onto the street and see real people, strangers, and you must still remind yourself, "These are the people I vow to love." Can you do that? It's very strange, isn't it? When you're in a secluded place, facing no one, you vow to love all beings, but then you step out and meet many real people and immediately forget not loving anyone. Doesn't that happen? So now, when your eyes see sentient beings, your mind must immediately remind you, and your thought must arise instantly, "I vow to love all people like this." Can you do that? You must think like that to truly establish the virtue of loving kindness. For example, who is in front of you, fellow practitioners, right now? Whoever you see, you must love them. And right now, who do you see? 5. Cultivating humility. We must also contemplate humility. Humility means always respecting everyone, seeing everyone as superior to yourself, and always seeing yourself as small. Always seeing your flaws, seeing yourself as inferior. So much so that if a thought of arrogance arises when you feel good about yourself, feeling superior to others, you must immediately have a thought to restrain it. You must see yourself as merely dust as grass. Whenever your face looks arrogant, whenever you look at the world with half-closed eyes, seeing everyone as worthless, that's when you must remember that you are just dust and grass. You must start respecting people. These thoughts must be constant to establish the virtue of humility in your mind, or the virtue of patience and endurance. When you know that in life you will encounter many adversities, many people who dislike and oppose you, you must contemplate in advance. You must contemplate, when facing those who oppose me, I vow to love them all. Or, you contemplate forgiveness for the mistakes of others. Now, when others make mistakes, you must not hate them, be angry, or bear grudges. You must know that you might be able to scold them, to make them afraid, but you must find a way to teach them. These are thoughts you must contemplate constantly. 6. Balancing joy and serenity. The attitude of a true Buddhist practitioner embodies two fundamental qualities, joy and deep serenity. How can both of these be present in one person at the same time? If they are, you are practicing Buddhism correctly. When people look at you, they should see a sense of calm, deep serenity, and joy. If they see you as deeply serene but not joyful, something is still amiss. Or, if they see you as joyful but not deeply serene, that's also not quite right. Do you agree? So, how do you know, fellow practitioners? You must constantly check your attitude. You should be both joyful, amiable, and at peace, deeply serene. And to check, what should you do? You should always carry a mirror in your pocket. When you're alone, pull out the mirror and look. Am I joyful but serene? Joyful and serene. Then, when you go out and talk to people, if you maintain that, then you are practicing correctly. But if you're always joyful but not serene, that's not right. And if you're always serene like a mysterious being, looking at you and not understanding anything, cold and aloof, that's not right either. So, these two attitudes reflect the inner state of your mind, showing that it has been meticulously purified, both amiable joy and deep serenity. 7. Self-reflection. And when something unpleasant happens, you must always blame yourself first. As our ancestors said, first blame yourself, then blame others. Don't immediately point fingers. Remember that. Is there anyone here named Mr. Blame-It-All? No. So don't blame excessively. In reality, we tend to blame quite a lot, don't we? Whenever something happens, we immediately blame others, thinking we are innocent. From now on, you must learn to look at yourself first. There are certain contemplation practices in Buddhism that are also considered right thought, such as the contemplation of loving-kindness, non-self, impermanence, and so on. All these are right thought aimed at purifying our minds. For example, with the contemplation of loving-kindness, we sit and imagine loving all sentient beings. This contemplation, if practiced continuously, will gradually fill our hearts with love. We will be able to love everyone. 8. Contemplating non-self. For example, with the contemplation of non-self, the Buddha's teaching tells us that there is no true self, no true I. This body is not truly ours, and this mind is not truly ours. We'll talk more about that later. So, we must recognize that the self is not real. We must contemplate this deeply, understanding for ourselves why the Buddha said the self is not real. You must find out for yourself. This is a very profound teaching that leads to liberation. We've talked about it a lot before. 9. Contemplating impermanence. For example, with the contemplation of impermanence, we reflect that nothing in this life lasts forever. Everything gradually changes. When something happens, we remain calm, knowing that life is constantly changing. So, if someone loves us, and then they hate us, that's just life. And wealth and prosperity can turn to dust in an instant. All these things bring us peace because life is impermanent. 10. Using thought to quell deluded thoughts. Here's an important point: using contemplation to quell deluded thoughts. For example, when we practice meditation, the hardest part for a meditator is wandering thoughts that constantly arise. At that moment, you don't want to think, but your mind, by habit, keeps generating one thought after another. Before you have the ability to simply stop wandering thoughts, you must still use contemplation to quell them. For example, when a torrent of wandering thoughts arises, you tell yourself, "Don't think anymore. Don't think anymore." That's also a form of contemplation, isn't it? Contemplation to quell wandering thoughts. Or, if you're constantly preoccupied with thoughts of wealth or poverty, you tell yourself, wealth and poverty are like floating clouds. Let them go. Don't think about them anymore. The words you use to remind yourself are also right thought. You use right thought to quell deluded thoughts. In the initial stage, you quell deluded thoughts with such contemplation. But later, you'll be able to gently remind yourself. Eventually, you won't need to use contemplation anymore. You'll simply know that a wandering thought has arisen, and it will immediately disappear. That's a later stage. But in the initial stage, you still need to use contemplation to quell deluded thoughts. Do you, fellow practitioners, do that? Anyone who practices goes through that stage of using contemplation to quell deluded thoughts. And that's correct, not wrong. 11. The aging brain. Those who are old tend to forget, don't they? The ability to recall things from memory isn't as strong. That's because our brains weaken with age. But you must practice in a way that your brain doesn't weaken as you age. We practice Qigong. We practice meditation. We practice loving kindness. This is very strange. Those who practice loving kindness extensively, their brains don't weaken with age. Their brains remain good. So, if you want your brain to remain good in old age, you must practice loving kindness now. Always contemplate loving all beings. Then, in old age, your brain will still be very good. Try it. Don't just believe it. Try practicing, and if it's not good in old age, come find me and make me accountable. 12. Zen koans and doubt. In Chinese Zen Buddhism, there's a very strange method of teaching the Dharma. When a Zen master sees that their disciple has entered meditation, meaning their mind is calm, but they haven't yet attained wisdom and enlightenment, the Zen master will create a question or a riddle for the disciple. This makes the disciple's mind both concentrated and questioning, both calm and curious. One day, they will attain wisdom and awakening. This is the method of using koans or doubt mass. However, it should only be applied to those who have already entered concentration. If you give a koan to someone who hasn't entered concentration, it will only make their mind extremely strained. This is why the ancient Zen masters were very cautious. We don't have time to talk much about this path. 13. The interrelation of merit and thought. Let's talk about the relationship between merit and thought. For example, a person with merit will easily have wholesome thoughts, right? But a person with less merit or heavy karma will easily have unwholesome thoughts arise in their mind. There's a connection between merit and thought. A person who, in a previous life, often did good deeds, helped others, and revered the Buddha will now have wholesome thoughts arise in their mind naturally and effortlessly. Their thoughts are usually good and wholesome. Merit maintains one's mind. But a person who, in a previous life, often did evil deeds, will now easily have wrong thoughts arise in their mind. So, when you find wrong thoughts frequently appearing in your mind, what must you do? You must repent and confess, because you know this is past bad karma creating these ugly thoughts. You must diligently prostrate to the Buddha and repent. You must diligently do good deeds and help others so that through that merit your mind can be transformed. It's similar for someone with mental illness. We say that someone with bad thoughts arising in their mind is due to bad karma, right? But these bad thoughts, when they reach an extreme, are called mental illness. That's all it is, though it's also related to the brain. But when we look at it from the perspective of karma, if bad karma manifests as mental illness, then you must accumulate merit, prostrate to the Buddha and repent and accumulate merit. However, a person who is completely mentally ill finds it very difficult to accumulate merit. So, you must find a way to arrange things, to force and compel that person to accumulate merit themselves. For example, a daughter whose mother has mental illness. When the mother is stable after being in the hospital, I tell the daughter, you must find broken paths and make your mother carry a hoe to dig up earth and fill in the potholes for people to walk on. When the mother fills in the path and others walk on it, it will immediately reduce the wrong thoughts in her mind. So, we remember that there's a strong connection between thought, merit, and demerit. If you have too many bad thoughts and you don't even realize they are bad, then that person has very heavy karma. For example, bad thoughts arise, and you realize, oh, I have bad thoughts in my mind. This person still has spiritual root. But when you think wrongly and don't even know it's wrong, that's truly pitiful. These beings will descend to hell, become animals or hungry ghosts. It's truly terrifying when you are wrong and you don't even know you are wrong. And in this life, is that common? Very common. Sometimes, when you criticize someone for doing something wrong, they are wrong, but they don't know they are wrong. They still defend themselves, feeling very pitiful. Therefore, a correct teaching saves the whole world, while a wrong teaching destroys countless generations. At that point, people are wrong, but they don't know they are wrong. So, what the teacher says is very important. 14. Thought and speech. Let's talk a little about thought and speech. In principle, if you think of something, can you say it? If you think of the teaching of loving kindness, you can speak about loving kindness. If you think of the teaching of non-self, you can speak about non-self. If you think of the virtue of patience, you can speak about the virtue of patience. You can speak about it, but can you do it? Not yet. Thinking makes it easy to speak, and speaking makes it easy to speak. But you might not be able to do it. So, we see that the distance between thought and action is very far, and the distance between speech and action is very far. So, we must be careful. And there's something else. Once you speak, you tend to show off a little. And when you show off, your merit decreases. And when your merit decreases, it becomes harder to practice. So, a person who presents the Dharma with a hint of showing off is the hardest person to practice in this world. Our ancestors said, speak before you act, and you won't get there. That's also an inductive conclusion drawn from many experiences in our lives and the lives of others. If someone talks a lot about their planned work, they won't be able to do it, because it falls into the error of showing off. Therefore, if you have a Dharma understanding, you should only contemplate it inwardly and then act upon it. Don't display it or talk too much about it. Often, when we meet and discuss the Dharma, we must be careful not to fall into the error of showing off, otherwise we won't be able to practice that Dharma. The matter of speech will be discussed in our next talk on right speech. Today, we'll only touch on it briefly. 15. Thought and action. Now, let's talk about the relationship between thought and action. The transition from thought to action goes through 3 stages. Thinking that something needs to be done. Thinking of all the ways to do it. Deciding to do it. Beginning to do it. These are 4 stages. For example, there's a pothole in front of your house or a neighbor's house, or a section of the road you frequently use that is damaged, making it dangerous for people. You think that filling that pothole is something that needs to be done. That's the first step. Second, you think of ways to do it. Where to get the soil, when to do it, who to ask for help, how to flatten it, what's the best time, maybe discuss it with the neighborhood leader, and so on. That's thinking of ways to do it. After thinking it through, then you decide to do it. This is the most important part, because once you decide to do it, taking action is just a small step. But the previous stage of thinking, I need to fill that pothole, I need to buy soil, I need to do it. Everyone can think like that. But to actually make the decision to do it, that's not easy. We are often hampered by laziness, shyness, and timidity, preventing us from making a decision. The value lies in the decision in your mind. The person who decides to do it will do it. But everyone thinks about things that need to be done. Many people sitting here think about doing something as grand as being a head of state. They sit and think, if I were the leader of this country, I would do all sorts of things. I would make Vietnam the most powerful country in the world. They sit and imagine all sorts of things. But then you tell them to go do it and they say, oh, my wife is sick, my child is ill. Later. The distance between thinking about doing something and deciding to do it is a huge gap. But the decision to act in the mind is difficult for several reasons. You have to overcome your own laziness, your shyness, and your weakness in your mind. Sometimes, acting means your life will change. You might have to spend money, you might lose time. These things hold you back, so you don't dare to do it. Or, when you act, it might affect those around you. For example, if you want to do a good deed, you have to spend money, which means your family has to cut back on expenses affecting them. So, you hesitate and don't do it. And you don't know what the good or bad consequences will be. You want to do it, but you're afraid that doing it might not be good. You want to fill a pothole, but you're afraid that after filling it, it might become even more difficult for people to pass. These are the things that make it difficult. Young people tend to be impetuous, thinking they can do anything immediately. But older people, having failed many times, are not overconfident. They consider everything very carefully. Young people think of something and immediately believe they are right and can do it right away. But after 20 or 30 failures, they start to be more cautious in their thinking. 16. The structure of the mind. In our discussion of contemplation, let's briefly analyze the psychological structure. Remember the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. To understand these 5, you need to read books about them. Our topic today doesn't allow for in-depth discussion, but let's just touch on it a little. Our mind has 2 structures: perception and mental formations. Mental formations is the psychological and conscious region responsible for all contemplation, reasoning, searching, creativity, recollection, and all mental activities. However, our activities manifest partially on the perception aggregate so that we are aware of them. It's like a computer. It has a CPU and various cards operating inside. But it projects onto the monitor so we can see what we're doing. Similarly, in our minds, the perception aggregate manifests images and language so we know what we've been thinking. But the actual thinking itself is very complex and intricate, residing deep within the mental formations, and we rarely see the mental formations. Only those who enter very deep meditation can see the mental formations. Normally, we only see the perception aggregate. For example, a person with a tranquil mind, when listening to the Dharma, only listens and sees the Dharma teacher. Their mind is empty, there's nothing else. But a person whose mind isn't yet like that, while looking at the Dharma teacher, still has images appearing in their mind, flickering and wavering, right? Do you? You still have thoughts, language, inner speech accompanying and debating the Dharma talk. The Venerable's words resonate in your ears, but your mind still has other thoughts, other arguments accompanying it, right? Right? We're laying out the truth here, aren't we? Or, when you're driving, your eyes are looking at the road, but you're not fully seeing the road. Many imaginary images in your mind are still appearing. Do you? So, sometimes you accidentally cut someone off because your mind is seeing your own imagined images, not the road. So, these images and the inner speech echoing in your mind are the perception aggregate. But the actual deeper thinking, that is the mental formations, operating very heavily, and we don't have the power to see it. That's a little about the psychological structure. We won't go into much detail here. 17. External influence on thought. Let's talk about external influences. Don't assume that all thoughts are yours. Don't think, oh, I'm thinking, so this thought is mine. No, it's not. Sometimes when you get angry, it's not because of you, but because you're possessed by a demon, due to an external influence from the invisible world affecting your mind. Or you think of something very profound and noble, and you might not realize it's due to the influence of celestial beings or bodhisattvas affecting your mind. It's not your own. Sometimes we discover very beautiful things, not realizing it's due to the Buddha's grace. It's not our own. So don't always say that thinking is entirely yours. Sometimes we are influenced by external forces. But the important thing is the causes that allow the Buddhas and bodhisattvas to plant good thoughts in our hearts, or the causes that allow negative spirits to influence our minds with unwholesome thoughts. The important thing is the cause. If we constantly revere the Buddhas and celestial beings, if we respect people, if we always see ourselves as small, like dust or grass, then good things will always manifest in our minds. At that time, we receive the Buddha's grace. Conversely, if we don't know how to revere the Buddhas and celestial beings, if we are arrogant, seeing ourselves as superior, then bad thoughts will easily appear in our minds. And the suffering comes from being wrong and not knowing it, which is very dangerous. The cause is important, the cause that allows us to be influenced by a certain force. Remember that. Teen. Thought and right view. So, we remember the Buddha saying, mind is the forerunner of all states. Therefore, right thought prepares a pure and upright inner self before we can practice the difficult right path stages later on. We also remind ourselves that right thought complements right view. Right view is what we learn, right? But if we diligently contemplate, we can discover 10 more things. So it enhances our right view. Right view is the foundation of knowledge for us to contemplate. But if we skillfully contemplate, we can discover many new facts, many new Dharma teachings. So, right view is complemented by right thought. 19. The transformation of the mind. Our discussion about right thought is a discussion about our inner self. We see that initially our minds are like a muddy swamp full of greed, hatred, and foulness. But today we know the Buddha's Dharma and we bring the Buddha's Dharma to plant on top of that muddy, foul swamp. Thus, this swamp becomes a beautiful, fragrant garden of flowers. We see our minds like an ocean full of stormy waves. But today we have encountered the great ship of the Buddha's Dharma, and we sail safely on that peaceful ship, no longer battered by the waves. We see our minds like a desolate wilderness, a tangled jungle full of wild beasts and thorns. But the Buddha's Dharma has given us a clear path to lead us out of that dense forest to a place of peace. And the ultimate dream, the goal we strive for, is to complete the entire Noble Eightfold Path so that our mind dissolves, no longer being us. It becomes all Dharma, all the universe. I have a poem that says it better. My mind is a muddy swamp, so I place my hands together, begging for the Buddha's Dharma to be planted here. From this day, my mind, a fragrant, beautiful flower. My mind is a vast ocean, full of tumultuous waves. May the Buddha's Dharma ship sail me to a place of peace. My mind is a wild forest, full of wild beasts wandering. May the Buddha's Dharma path lead me to a tranquil place. This mind dissolves, becoming the vast Dharma realm, becoming boundless love. No longer I. Namo Fundamental Teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Questions and answers. Question: if someone dies in a hospital, can their soul still return home, or are there any obstacles? Answer: yes, it's true that if you die in a hospital, you're usually connected to that place. However, your connection to your family at home still exists, so you can still return home. There are no obstacles. Don't worry. Family members with broad, compassionate minds will always feel your presence. Question: is it better to bury or cremate for liberation? Answer: I've talked about this many times. You can find and listen to the old recordings. We don't have time now. Question: how can one distinguish between arrogance and self-confidence, and between an inferiority complex and humility? Answer: whoever asked this question is very intelligent. Self-confidence, when thinking correctly, naturally brings the strength of truth, giving you self-confidence. So, self-confidence is good, but be careful if it turns into arrogance. Arrogance always makes you feel superior to others. It's an illusion, a mistaken thought, which is a demerit. So, be careful. When you feel you understand something and it makes you self-confident, go ahead, but be careful not to let it turn into arrogance, because they are very close. This is a subtle question. I commend the person who asked it. Question: how can we distinguish between wandering thoughts and hopes for the future? Answer: if hope comes from correct contemplation, from right thought, it is a natural outcome that motivates us to move forward because there is hope. But it must come from what is right. If it comes from aspiration or dreaming, it's not hope but rather a diluted ambition. This is a very dangerous type of wandering thought. So it just depends on whether your thinking is correct or not. Right thought. Thinking in accordance with the Dharma creates a very gentle but firm hope. But if you are ambitious and dreaming, that's a mistaken ambition or dream, which is dangerous. Question: some say that if you chant the Buddha's name 10 times with right concentration at the moment of death, you will be reborn in the Pure Land. Is that true? Answer: don't believe it immediately. Try dying first and then we'll see. Question: is it wrong for a Dharma teacher to use informal language when referring to the Buddha? Answer: the teacher might sometimes speak informally, perhaps out of joy, feeling very close to the Buddha. But it's better to use respectful terms like the Buddha or the Blessed One. Using overly informal terms is too casual. Question: why are some people, like fortune tellers, able to earn a lot of money, sometimes millions a day, just by sitting there and telling fortunes fairly accurately? What kind of merit do they have for this? They just need to look at your face and hear your birth date, and they know about your parents, siblings, etc. Answer: a fortune teller who tells fortunes accurately and is rewarded generously has accumulated merit from a previous life. This merit might give them psychic abilities or spiritual insight. However, if a fortune teller doesn't advise others to accumulate merit, then they won't have good karmic results in the future. Why no good results? Because the fortune teller is benefiting from telling fortunes and receiving money, but they are not encouraging others to perform good deeds. If they don't tell people to accumulate merit, then the fortune teller will suffer greatly in old age. Remember this important point. If you tell fortunes, you must always advise people to accumulate merit. Tell them to go to the temple, and so on. It's important. Question: my child passed away at noon 7 years ago, and I don't understand why. Now, at noon, I still feel confused and anxious, and at night, I have trouble sleeping. Answer: at that moment, all the suppressed anxieties and troubles come to you and affect your mind. So you must trust and let go of everything, and you won't be affected anymore. That's right. Question: non-Buddhists who visit temples and prostrate just because they see others doing it without understanding if it's right or wrong. Should they prostrate to Shakyamuni Buddha a certain number of times, Maitreya Buddha a certain number of times, or Guanyin Bodhisattva, or the Golden Mother of the Jade Pool? Some temples just say Namo Amitabha Buddha. What does Namo Amitabha Buddha mean? Answer: just keep going to the temple a bit more, and you'll understand everything. Question: when evil and powerful people bully us weaker Buddhists, how can we transform them? How can we love them? Answer: where you might have bullied others similarly. Now you are in a weaker position, so you are being bullied. First, you must practice patience and endurance and practice forgiveness. If you find that you cannot endure their malice, then you must pray to the Buddha for protection. If you see that their malice is too much for you and affects your family's life, you must immediately pray to the Buddha for help, asking for them to lessen their harm. Gradually, you will accumulate merit and resolve the karmic debt with them. Remember that